What's the worst thing you've ever smelt? Someone's colostomy bag ruptured on a flight from LAX to HNL. I was in my 20s and heading to Schofield. Got on plane, a young man came off plane like Gandalf. So I've tried iron and copper, but for me it had to be gold. My coworker, no joke. I've got Crohn's disease, and over the summer, I also picked up a random DV bug. This ended up getting me hospitalized with kidney failure. While in there, my bowel movements turned toxic. Now I know that poop isn't meant to smell nice, but this stuff was horrendous. It was a blue-green liquid that smelt reminiscent of zoos, chemical waste, and rotting flesh. I had to get a sample for testing, and the nurse who had to take it to the lab said that she'd never seen or smelt anything like it. Decomposed bear head that had been sitting for a month and then simmered for an afternoon to get the skull. In 10th grade, this kid named Elvis, that's really his name, and some other kid took Limburger cheese and smeared it all over the radiators in school in the morning. When the heat started kicking on, it filled the whole school with the most rotten stench that burned your eyes and nose. This was a 2-story building with 4 classrooms on each floor, Catholic school. They tried opening the windows to ventilate the building, but it was midwinter, freezing cold. They ended up having to send us home because the school stank so bad and was freezing. They didn't know at the time it was the radiators. It smelled like a moldy, old sponge that someone used to clean up the poop that came out of a dead body. Dead bodies that had been found days after a carbon monoxide poisoning. They had a handyman install a new boiler. It was not installed properly and he killed the whole house. The bodies had literally melted through the floor from the heat, CO, and condensation. The police thought it was a murder scene at first. Tonsil stones. Not worst as in vomit-inducing, but as in oh god. No. I was my mother's caretaker after her cancer diagnosis. Squamous cell carcinoma of the supraglottis. After chemo and radiation not working, she decided on hospice. The cancer was spreading and I knew it. The lump in her neck got bigger and was very much visible. It was trailing upwards towards her ear. They took her feeding tube out so she only ate when she wanted to. One day, I was sitting on the arm of her recliner, cleaning her up from the ramen noodle broth she'd spilt on her shirt, shaky hands, and giving her morphine. And she leaned in like she was going to tell me a secret. She was whispering because she was trying not to cry, telling me thank you and how much she loved me, and I could smell it on her breath. I could literally smell the cancer eating her alive. It was like nothing I've ever smelled before and something I hope to never smell again. Sickeningly sweet, strangely chemical, and a hint of rot and decay. I knew my mother was dying and I was already destroyed, but that day I went home and sobbed in my bathtub for 3 hours. She was gone 2 weeks later. The best woman that ever lived. The smell of a rotten garbage bag left in the heat for too long. It's like a mix of stale food and decay. Just thinking about it makes me gag. Well, a tonsil stone. Okay, I gotta go with that smell when you open a Tupperware container that's been in the back of the fridge for like 3 months. You know the one. It's like death and forgotten vegetables had a baby and that baby threw up in your face. I'd about worst, but definitely get PTSD from the smell of deployed airbags. Will never forget how it smelled after my wreck. A rotten egg. I'm pretty sure it was fertilized and went bad with a chicken fetus inside. I keep chickens and have a rooster. It was chunky, it looked like feta cheese with an ungodly smell. I cracked it, then immediately ran away from it. It was that bad. Rotting potatoes. A divorced husband living alone in his house, lost custody of his kids, house was being foreclosed on because they couldn't keep up with payments, and committed suicide by hanging in his shed in the yard. Took about 2 to 3 weeks or so before neighbors called the 911 for a wellness check. Thing that got me was the wasps that made a giant nest in the shed and had been feeding on him with miscellaneous other bugs. Horse had a severe sinus infection and sneezed puss knot all over my pants and shoes. Natto. It's a food from Japan. Fermented soybeans makes me throw up a little in my mouth just thinking of it. Dog's breath after he ate his own poop. The liver breath of a cirrhotic alcoholic who is in the midst of an upper intestinal bleed.